My friends, tensions are increasing once again between France and Russia. On May 20th, French Chief of Staff General Thierry Burkhard went to Kiev. What was the purpose of this trip? On the 28th of May, French President Macron urged the green light to allow Ukraine to strike deep inside Russia with long-range weapons. And now, according to the latest news, France will send a force of instructors to Ukraine to expand the French training mission of Ukrainian forces. We could be talking of about 200 instructors to help Ukraine form a NATO-trained Mechanized Brigade. But these troops will also help with demining and help with the maintenance of military equipment. Macron also announced that France will supply Ukraine with a number of Mirage 2000 fighter jets and that they would train all the Ukrainian pilots. But he also highlighted that Paris will support Kiev until the very end.
Les amis, c'est pour la France. Une belle attaque, hein?
And for the first time since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, French soldiers could return home in coffins. This is perhaps Macron's response to Russia's aggressive moves against French interests around the world. Azerbaijan, Russia, China, investigation into foreign interference in French overseas territories. Is Russia behind the French debacle in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, the migrant crisis in Mayotte? Perhaps even the riots in New Caledonia. Russia and its allies understood that to make the French elite squeal, all they had to say was the word decolonization. As Macron is taking the forefront of this European coalition, the French MP of Mayotte said that Macron wants to take a leading role in Ukraine, but is not even able of being respected by the Comorian president, Azali. We could really say that France and Russia have entered a new Cold War. Welcome to History Legends, and here are the latest news of the Russo-Ukrainian War. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. As you know, some of my Ukraine videos have been targeted with limited or no ads. So make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running. Thank you to everyone that has already helped. And welcome to the headquarters. Let's start with the French deployment in Ukraine. I already made an entire video about it, so if you're interested, the link is in the description below. For now, we're only talking about a support role by French instructors and technicians. Thing is, apparently some of them are already present in Ukraine. So is this what Macron meant mid-March when he announced the possibility of deploying ground forces to Ukraine? Well, he talked about Odessa and grandiose plans, but what we're witnessing now seems to be a very scaled-down mission of what was initially thought of. Meanwhile, in the last months, there were numerous claims of French army soldiers fighting on the front line. The rumor was that French soldiers were deployed near Slavyansk. They would mainly come from the 3rd French Foreign Legion Regiment. According to this article, for the moment, this deployment would only involve around 100 soldiers, artillery specialists, but 1,500 should eventually arrive in Ukraine. Not only was this false, it doesn't even make sense since this 3rd Regiment of the French Foreign Legion is stationed in French Guyana. The other thing is that the French Foreign Legion is not an independent contingent. They're fully attached to the French armed forces. 10 to 15% of these troops are also French. It's not only foreigners. So if legionnaires are transferred to Ukraine, it's the French armed forces that are deployed. A lot of it stemmed from dubious claims by Russian soldiers fighting near Chasiv, claiming they faced French active duty personnel, mostly through radio intercepts. Reality is that they probably encountered volunteers of Ukraine's International Legion, which was indeed fighting in the sector of Chasiv. There was also this video proving that the French army was also involved in ground operations. Only problem, the so-called French soldier had an arm patch of Gabon. There was also this video that went viral on Twitter recently. Essentially, we see Russian soldiers capturing a French soldier somewhere in Ukraine. Except, it's all fake. I'll show you a small sample.
Hey man, where's that? Ne tirez pas, ne tirez pas.
The supposedly French soldier has the worst accent ever. Clearly not a French-speaking native. Same thing for the guy on the radio. They just memorized a few words from Google Translate and they recorded the video. Why would they even speak French to Russian soldiers? I mean, let's be honest, it would be known and visible if all of a sudden 1,500 French army soldiers appeared on the battlefield. Now, does that mean that there are no French military personnel in Ukraine? Like we said before, it's complicated. There are certainly French advisors in Ukraine. There are also probably a bunch of technicians there for the maintenance of the Scalp missiles, the Caesar artillery systems, or even the AMX-10RC light tanks. And apparently now instructors to train Ukrainian forces. More specifically, train and equip a brigade-sized unit of 4,500 Ukrainian soldiers somewhere in the west of the country. I wonder what they're even gonna teach them, when the French army has forgotten all knowledge on how to fight in trenches and they don't even know how to deal with FPV drones. Now this is a risky move because it opens the possibility that French soldiers will die and France will not be able to respond. A bit like the 1983 Beirut barracks bombing, which left 241 US and 58 French military personnel KIA. And if France does respond, well, we just entered World War III.
Madness and stupidity.
Because of that, the Russian population is starting to hate on France, as you can see with this poster. Strategically placed right next to the French embassy in Moscow. It says French people don't repeat the same mistakes. The French already fought with the Nazis, but the Charlemagne division was destroyed in 1945. Sadly, they seem to forget the Free French Normandie-Niemen fighter regiment. They were all volunteers and the only Western Allied unit under direct Soviet command, from 1942 until the end of World War II. Pilot Marcel Albert was the unit's top ace, with 22 confirmed victories on the Eastern Front. They were also the first Free French to step foot inside Germany at the end of 1944. In June 1945, Stalin even allowed the French pilots to return home with their Yak-3s. The main area of conflict between France and Russia is located in Africa. Both countries have opposing interests in the region. In one of my previous videos, I talked about how France got kicked out, evicted from its bases in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Surprise, surprise, they were replaced by Russian mercenaries of the former Wagner PMC. And guess what? Even the US now got the boot from their precious base in Niger. In turn, France had to redeploy its forces towards Chad, Senegal, and Côte d'Ivoire. Although the leaders of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have now very close ties with Russia, can we say that their countries are now safer and more stable since the departure of French troops? Spoilers, not really. The Malian army suffered multiple defeats against jihadis at the end of 2023. On the 24th of November, the battle against the military base of Niafunke left 50 Malian soldiers KIA. On December 3rd, the Malian army lost 30 to 40 soldiers KIA when jihadists stormed the camp of La Bezanga. December 12th, 40 soldiers KIA, and on the 20th of December, another 10 near Dinanguru. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, in January 2024 alone, 439 people lost their lives due to continuous attacks from insurgents. One of the largest battles happened on the 31st of March 2024, when a Burkinabe army base was raided, leaving 53 soldiers and allied militiamen KIA. Same story in Niger, here from the BBC, October 2023. Niger security forces struggled to stem 7-year jihadist insurgency. At least 60 soldiers have been KIA in Niger in the deadliest attack since the army staged a coup in July. On the 21st of March 2024, 23 to 30 Nigerian soldiers fell in an ambush laid by insurgents near Tege. As you can see, a handful of Wagnerian mercenaries can only do so much in the immensity of the Sahel region. According to Brucey, as of February 2024, the Wagner presence in Mali had been halved to about 1,000 men, and sources within the PMC said that it is unable to meet the Malian regime's request for additional assistance. And according to the latest news, another group of Russian military instructors arrived in Niger. How can you seriously expect 1,000 Wagnerians to achieve what the French army could not do with 5,000 troops and modern equipment? Although Russia certainly has its role in France's geopolitical debacle in Africa, the deep reality is that France lost its prestige in Africa, mainly because of ideological reasons. Part of this problem is due to French elites completely submitting to colonial repentance, which in turn causes a great misunderstanding of Africa and its people. In turn, African leaders know that they can play that colonialism card to make Paris squeal at any moment. Just take a look at how the president of Congo, Félix Tshisekedi, humiliated France on French national TV.
Comment comprenez-vous que, apparemment, la Chine ou la Russie, qui ne sont pas des régimes démocratiques, eux, arrivent à progresser en Afrique?
Mais parce qu'ils ne viennent pas avec cette approche-là. Ils ne viennent pas avec cette arrogance, cette façon de donner des leçons qui est frustrante, en fait.
And guess what? Now it's the Prime Minister of Senegal, Ousmane Sonko, that is starting to talk about the withdrawal of the remaining French troops from the country. He even spoke about abandoning the CFA franc. Now, although a lot of attention was put on Western Africa, trouble is also brewing southeast of the continent, more specifically around this set of islands. Here you have Madagascar, to the south you have the French island of La Réunion, and to the north, Mayotte. This is where Russia is also scheming to expel France from that region. The president of the Union of the Comoros, Azali Assoumani, spoke at length on the telephone with Lavrov, the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs. Now, on the 17th of February 2024, Andrei Andreev, the Russian ambassador in Madagascar, expressed Russia's willingness to support the Comoros in their quest to regain sovereignty over the island of Mayotte. He said this during an interview with Comorian newspaper Al One. Andreev highlighted his country's commitment to consider all requests from the Comorian side in alignment with the resolutions of the UN General Assembly. That is a frontal attack on French sovereignty over the island of Mayotte. Now, are we going to see Wagnerian mercenaries storm the island? Not yet. Although here in a speech on the 5th of June, Putin said that Russia will deliver the same type of weapons to conflict zones to strike Western assets of those countries that deliver weapons to Ukraine. Imagine Russia handing long-range weapons such as anti-ship missiles to the Comoros.
Fuck.
Now, why is there even beef between the Comoros and France? Long story short, France purchased Mayotte in 1841. And over the years, the 4 islands of the Comoros came under French administration. In 1974, an independence referendum was held in each one of the 4 islands of the Comoros archipelago. Overall, 94.57% of the people voted yes for independence. This is where France faked an injury in the penalty area, a very slimy move. The French National Assembly approved the new law on Comorian independence, but stated that the new constitution should be approved individually by each island. Surprise, surprise, Mayotte voted at 63% in favor to remain within France. And then to consolidate their power, the French did a new referendum in Mayotte in 1976, where 99% of voters rejected the proposal to join with the Comoros. And that's the story of how Mayotte remained French. So that's the first part of the beef. The second one was equally slimy. In 1975, French mercenaries under command of a man named Bob Denard ousted the first president of the Comoros, Ahmed Abdallah, who was replaced by Ali Soilih. After campaigning throughout Africa, in May 1978, Bob Denard returned to the Comoros with 43 men and carried out another coup against President Ali Soilih. That's how Bob Denard gave back the presidency to Ahmed Abdallah, the first president he ousted. This allowed France to use the Comoros as logistics base for military operations in Eastern Africa and provide weapons to areas under embargo like Mozambique, Angola, and South Africa. For France, this allowed plausible deniability. It wasn't France supplying weapons, it was the Comoros! Denard ended up being the commander of the 500-strong Presidential Guard of the Comoros between 1978 to 1989, when President Ahmed Abdallah died in mysterious conditions. Denard quickly left the country, only to return in September 1995, with 33 mercenaries aboard inflatable boats and 300 locals ready to stage a coup against President Said Mohamed Johar. But his attempt was stopped at the last moment by the French military, which brought him back to France for trial. He stayed a couple months in jail and he was released. With that being said, Mayotte is now home to 310,000 inhabitants. It's also the poorest administrative department in France, but still much richer than its neighbor. This attracted thousands of people from the Comoros in what we could call the Erdogan method. You see, of these 310,000 people living in Mayotte, 48% are immigrants, with the great majority coming from the Comoros. Now, as you know, everyone born on French soil gets the citizenship. Now, you can imagine if one day all these people get to vote for some independence referendum, what the results could be. Not surprisingly, Mayotte consistently votes far right due to its anti-immigration policies. In 2022, French authorities in Mayotte allegedly expelled 25,000 migrants back to where they came from. In this article, we learned that France established a deal with the Comoros in 2019. Development aid for the Comoros of 150 million euros from France in exchange for the readmissions of Comorian nationals. It was some sort of migratory blackmail. The moment migrants touch down on French soil, sending them back will almost be impossible. As you can see in this article by Le Monde on the 11th of February 2024, the French Minister of the Interior, Darmanin, announced amendments to the constitution due to the crisis in that region. Birthright will no longer be applicable in Mayotte. A month later, on the 16th of April, 400 French police officers and gendarmes of the military police were deployed to deal with this illegal migration crisis. On the 24th of April, the French government launched Operation Wambushu, aiming for the expulsion of 300 illegal migrants per day. This would account for 110,000 throughout the year. However, the problem is always the same. TV5 reported that the Comoros refused to allow a boat carrying migrants from Mayotte to dock. The Comoros do not intend to welcome people in an irregular situation, aka illegal migrants in the French department of Mayotte, which Paris plans to expel in the coming days. What a scam! So the Comoros got free money from France to develop hospitals and schools, but they did not do their part of the deal. Of course, so that the Comoros can get more money! Like I told you earlier, the French MP of Mayotte said that Macron wants to take a leading role in Ukraine, but is not even capable of being respected by Comorian President Azali. Now Russia not only supports the restitution of Mayotte to the Comoros, but also the restitution of the French Éparses Islands to Madagascar. You see, when Madagascar gained its independence in 1960, France kept some small islands and atolls all around. This provides France with an exclusive economic zone, or EEZ, of 640,000 square kilometers. In brown you have the EEZ of Mayotte and La Réunion, and in blue the ones of the Éparses Islands. Surprise, surprise, there are also claims of huge amounts of natural resources that remain to be exploited in those French EEZ. In the near future, we could very well imagine Madagascar ask help from Russia or even China to snatch these islands back from France. What if all of a sudden Malagasy troops launched an amphibious operation? Would France go to war for largely uninhabited islands?
Yeah, baby!
And this is not the only place where Russia and China could tag team France. Now we move to the South Pacific region with the French island of New Caledonia. In this article from Politico, Chinese boogeyman looms over New Caledonia's independence vote. It's not a surprise. For decades, indigenous Kanak independence supporters have grown very close ties with China, since they feel it's the only power that could help them emancipate themselves from France. Now just imagine if New Caledonia became independent and that China built a naval base there, 1,300 kilometers from Brisbane. Fast forward to the 13th of May 2024. Russian telegram channels reported French occupiers in New Caledonia. They're trying to intimidate the local population in order to maintain control over a valuable colony that has taken the path of fighting French colonialism. You see always the same theme about decolonization. And in that telegram post, when they mention these valuable resources, it's because New Caledonia is home to 10% of the world's nickel reserves, a mineral you use to make stainless steel. Many impoverished indigenous communities left rural areas to move towards the capital city of Nouméa. Now, in reality, France is completely unable to make this industry profitable, mainly due to the low mining costs in Indonesia. But maybe another country could turn things around. Overall, this means New Caledonia is not doing well economically. In May, numerous roadblocks were erected across the island's capital, Nouméa. Unlike regular protests, the French national sport, these ones turned violent because some of these protesters were heavily armed. Some had pistols like this Glock 17, others were equipped with what seems to be AR-15 rifles, and we could even see a 5.56 scoped Steerhog SA rifle. In this video, this protester essentially said the French police was extremely aggressive as he came to disarm the protesters, which according to him had no weapons. Either he's coping or he's very naive. Le Figaro quoted a parliamentary report stating 64,000 weapons are legally held in New Caledonia, but the total could exceed 100,000, even 120,000. That's almost one weapon for every 2 inhabitants. The drama really started on May 15th. When a 22-year-old French gendarme, Nicolas Molinari, was KIA, and 3 other police officers of the BAC were wounded. In response, France dispatched a force of 500 police officers and military police units to reinforce the island's 1,800 police contingent, which were in certain sectors put in extreme difficulty, like this unit of gendarmes that protected an important intersection. Now just imagine if these Kanak rebels got their hands on Russian weapons, such as manpads, RPGs, and even drones. On May 16th, another gendarme fell, and a total of 192 police officers would be wounded during the riots. By the 17th of May, 163 people had been arrested. The next day, a European inhabitant lost his life in a firefight. Many of them feared for their life. In response, both loyalists and separatists formed heavily armed self-defense militias. The suburbs of Nouméa eventually looked apocalyptic. Meanwhile, French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal claimed on the 20th of May that 76 roadblocks had been dismantled. With everything I told you up until now, the big question is, who's behind all these tensions in New Caledonia? Although some protesters raised Azeri flags, nobody seriously thought Azerbaijan was really behind all this. Once again, quick historical context. French Emperor Napoleon III claimed the island in 1853. Over the years, France deported a lot of convicts and rebels to this new island. New Caledonia also became home to refugees from Alsace-Lorraine. By the late 1800s, indigenous Kanaks had largely been expropriated from the best lands. 1914, World War I starts. 120 Caledonians during their military service in France are brought directly to the front. In the following years, another 2,000 men from New Caledonia were brought under the flag, 18% of the island's male population, 1,047 indigenous Kanaks, and 978 Europeans. Of those 2,000, 575 would fall on the battlefield. Round 2 with World War II. In 1941, 300 Caledonians and 300 Tahitians volunteered for the Free French Forces. Together they formed the Battalion of the Pacific, which would fight heroically at Bir Hakeim against Rommel's panzers in 1942. 156 of them would never see their homeland again. Ari Wong Kim died in 2023. He was the last survivor of this Battalion of the Pacific. This also goes to show the complicated ethnic makeup of New Caledonia. After 170 years of French administration, the original indigenous Kanak inhabitants make up about 40% of the island's population. Europeans are numbered at 27%, and the remaining 33% are either mixed or come from abroad, such as neighboring French islands like Tahiti, Wallis and Futuna, or from immigrants from Asia. Now the big drama started when the Melanesian nation of Papua New Guinea achieved its independence from Australia on the 16th of September 1975. Then came the insurrection of the Portuguese-speaking Melanesians in East Timor against Indonesia. Once again, a big mess. A couple years later, the Anglo-French territory of Vanuatu, inhabited by Melanesian people, also got its independence in 1980. All this signaled to the indigenous Kanaks that they could too become independent, and that they could take up arms if necessary. This culminated with the Ouvéa hostage crisis. There's a very good movie about this event called L'Ordre et la Morale. In April 1988, over 30 armed Kanaks attacked a gendarmerie station on the island of Ouvéa. 4 military police officers were KIA and another 26 were captured, although 11 of them were later released. These Kanak insurgents took the other group of 15 hostages into a cave. That's when France sent 74 elite troops from various special operations units to storm the cave. The fighting was extremely difficult, but in the end, all hostages were freed, at the cost of 2 KIA and 4 wounded for the French troops. On the other side, 19 KIA and 14 captured for the Kanaks. There was also the debate that some of these wounded Kanaks, including the leader of this insurgent group, were not given proper medical aid after the battle and they died. Nonetheless, this tragedy led the French government to set the path for independence with 3 referendums. France also restituted a lot of land, provided Kanaks with increased political autonomy, and agreed that only those who have been living on the island since 1998 and their descendants could vote in the future referendums, thus greatly favoring indigenous Kanak communities. In 2018, the no to independence won at 56.6%. What not many people know is that the following year, another independence referendum was held in the Melanesian populated island of Bougainville. Although they're part of the Solomon Islands archipelago, they're part of Papua New Guinea. Just like in New Caledonia, independent supporters in Bougainville went through armed conflict, but this one was much bloodier. The insurgency cost the lives of 15 to 20,000 Bougainvillians. These evil Papua colonizers! Alright, sorry, it doesn't fit the narrative. Fast forward to 2019, Bougainville voted at 98% for independence, and the island should gain full independence by 2027. I mean, this must have seriously motivated the Kanaks in New Caledonia, and also worried NATO. Check this out, in 2019, China offered to construct airports, highways, bridges, and other facilities in Bougainville, and the Chinese private sector showed interest in developing the island's natural resources. It's also believed they heavily financed the pro-independence movement. Are we surprised? Here from AP, China signs pact with Solomon Islands to boost cooperation on law enforcement and security matters. And now from May 1st, 2024, is Bougainville the next battleground between China and the US? So we can clearly see that there is a Chinese geopolitical move to push into Melanesian nations. However, in New Caledonia, during the 2020 referendum, no to independence won at 53.3%. However, it was clearly going closer and closer. If they got that same plus 3% during the next round, they could very well become independent. 2021 marked the third and final round of these referendums. However, due to a number of deaths during the COV, pro-independence supporters asked the French government to postpone the referendum. France refused. I mean, at this point, they should have known that they deal with the French government. What did they expect? In turn, that third and final referendum was boycotted by pro-independence supporters, and the no won at 96.5%. This is when France pushed a new law that would essentially allow any French citizen living in New Caledonia for at least 10 years to vote in future referendums. This is what triggered the riots because it would make the independence of New Caledonia almost impossible. In the end, in New Caledonia, as of now, the crisis calmed down, at least for now. It all depends if Macron goes through with a reform that would see the expansion of the electoral body in New Caledonia. In the end, Russia could benefit from this crisis that is already turning into a logistical nightmare for French security forces. Like Putin said in his speech, Russia could supply a number of weapons to Kanak insurgents via third-party countries like the Solomon Islands and Vanuatu. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.